The envelope was small. You know, these are the ones they send greeting cards in. It was addressed to me, and I recognized the return address, so I went ahead and printed it out. When I saw the card inside, a big smile appeared on my face. Then I opened the card, I.J. Carey. Pretty much an average guy, although my life is somewhat better than the average person's. I am a deputy sheriff with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. The county is a great place to live, and I have a great job. The city of Hamilton is the seat of the district. It's a small town, but it's located on the shores of Hamilton Bay. Named after the guy who discovered it back when dinosaurs ruled the earth, so it's a tourist trap. A few museums and clubs, a few country music-leaning theaters, and the bay. Tourists are attracted to deep-sea fishing outside the bay, snorkeling near the reef, sailing, water skiing, you name it. We have a double baseball team affiliated with Baltimore Orioles and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Hamilton State University plays Division II basketball and football. They went to a bowl game last year. They lost, but at least they were invited. Most of the tourists are good people, although we do get the usual assortment of rowdies and habitual drunks. The Coast Guard manages the bay, and they only occasionally call for assistance. The problem is that during the warmer months, Hamilton's population swells to that of a large city, which means crime in the city increases. Gambling, drugs, prostitution, it all comes up. For the most part, we turn a blind eye to it unless it spills out and bothers the good people. Then we start working. The county has both a police department and a sheriff's office. The police do most of the patrol work. We handle jail, warrants, narcotics, traffic, and most other details that come up. The police sometimes need help, and we are not at all afraid to provide it. The two departments work well together. The district holds a big dance for its employees about every 6 months. Civilians, police, fire, and our 3 ambulance services are all involved. People who don't want to attend usually volunteer to take the place of those on duty who want to go. One of these evenings turned my life upside down. I'm not a Casanova type, but I've never had a problem getting dates if I wanted them. Women seem to like me, and I've always shown them respect, which helps a lot. I was at the dance talking with the rest of the team. A few dances, a few drinks, a lot of just talking and observing. I noticed a cute little woman sitting against the side wall talking to others. I watched her for a while and noticed that she wasn't dancing. I always tried to be a gentleman, so I walked over and asked her if she wanted to dance. She looked at me, smiled, and extended her hand. I heard a comment behind me. "Oh my God, another victim of the demon." I should have listened. Anyway, the DJ just started a slow ballad they call the Clutch and Grab special, so I had to hug her. She didn't seem to mind. I'm damn sure not. I don't know why I did it, but about halfway through the dance, I kissed her on the forehead. She pulled back, looked into my eyes, then leaned over and kissed me on the lips. I thought I had been struck by lightning. This time I pulled away. She was shorter than my 5'11", probably around 5'6" or so. She was in good shape, so I assumed she worked in one of the emergency services units. She had short-cropped black hair, which increased my suspicions. Then I saw her eyes. Oh God, I thought I was going to drown in them. They were great. Maybe they were purple. Maybe they were dark blue. But who cares? They were incredible. Their gaze was hypnotic. It was as if she was inviting me to kiss her again. If I had any brains, I would have run away right then. But I've never been the brightest bulb in the box, so I leaned in to taste those lips again. 6 months later, we got married. Her name was Alexandra. Most of her friends called her Sandy, but I called her Alex. She called me whatever she wanted. She was 2 years older than me, 27 to my 25, and she was a doll. Her figure was not petite, but it was close to it. Her breasts were perfectly proportional to her body. She had slender hips and what looked like a small butt. But if she walked past you, you couldn't look away. And it wasn't long before I realized why she was called a demon. She was a sergeant, higher in rank than me. She was one of 3 snipers on the Special Forces team. I was a corporal assigned to the Tide traffic accident investigation, Detail and Enforcement Unit. I mentioned earlier that the sheriff's office is a great team. Our marriage was a good example. Most agencies would have forced one of us to quit, probably Alex since she was the eldest. Other agencies would have one of us transferred to a non-law enforcement unit, radio, administration, public relations, something like that. But everything was calm in our department. They called us in and congratulated us, saying that there was one restriction that we must abide by. We could not work together on the same shift. It was normal for us. Also, the bosses liked us because we always volunteered for special operations and the like. When I bought my first pistol, it was a Bulldog. The Model 10 was a gift from my dad. The shift commander looked at me like I was crazy when I told him I wanted to take him with me as a backup. "What the hell do you need this damn gun for?" I explained to him why I like it and that it is much more accurate than people think. He asked if I qualified with this, and I assured him that I did and that I had the proper paperwork. Alex and I's salary allowed us to live in a nice apartment in a very close suburb of Hamilton. Neither of us could have afforded this place alone, but together we could live there and not have to worry about any other expenses. It wasn't a luxury apartment, but it had some very nice amenities. The kitchen had a built-in microwave and a built-in dishwasher. The bathroom was huge, with a walk-in shower and a spa bath. We liked it. I just returned home from a very long graveyard shift. The patrol was bad enough that paperwork kept me at the station for almost 2 more hours. When I finally crawled through the front door, Alex greeted me. "Do you want some breakfast, baby?" I just shook my head. "Not today, kitten. I am not hungry. I'm going to crawl into the shower for an hour and then go to bed." I crawled into the shower but had only been there for about 10 minutes when the door suddenly opened and Alex walked in. "What the hell?" "You may not be hungry," she grinned, "but I am." She smiled at me, and lights danced in her eyes. "She is here. The demon just struck." She soaped up the washcloth and began to scrub my back and shoulders. I have to admit, it felt damn good. She knew how to massage blocked muscles, and my neck really needed it. However, I noticed that once she reached my waist, her attention shifted to the more sensitive parts of my anatomy. She came up to me from the front, again lathering my throat, shoulders, and chest. She lowered herself to my feet, passing everything from my navel to my knees. She used the removable shower head to rinse me thoroughly. When she put it back around her neck, I wondered what she was up to. Then she looked at me. I could have sworn those beautiful violet eyes were red. If I didn't know better, I'd think that grin was hiding fangs. However, I didn't have to think about it for long. She kissed me and then fell to her knees. What she had not lathered, she now very slowly cleaned with her tongue. I was excited, and suddenly I didn't feel tired anymore. She turned me on, and our sex was like a flash, bright and all-consuming. When we reached the peak, I had to lean against the shower wall to stay on my feet. She turned slowly, leaning in to kiss me passionately. Baby," she purred. "That was a great snack." I looked at her incredulously. "Are you serious? Just a snack?" She looked almost shocked until I realized she was playing with me. "You don't think that was enough for me, do you?" My eyes closed as I exhaled. "Oh, God," I moaned. "I won't sleep today, will I?" "Poor baby," she pouted with feigned concern. "How many times have I told you?" Never remember God in front of a demon. She started laughing a completely evil laugh, a very long day. At the beginning of autumn, a new couple moved into the apartment above us. They became our closest friends. Mike was in the Army, stationed at Fort Hancock, about 15 miles northwest of Hamilton. His wife, Cindy, was something of a medical technician who also worked at the fort. They were a little younger than us. Mike was a first lieutenant in some special unit he couldn't talk about. They were on alert, it seemed, every month. When this happened, he could not leave the fort. Cindy used to come down and eat with us and then watch a movie with whoever of us was home. We met the day they moved. By the time the movers left, it was early evening. We walked up and introduced ourselves, inviting them to join us for pizza. It turned out that Cindy was as big a pizza lover as I was, so they accepted the invitation. About 2 blocks from the apartment, there was a great little pizzeria called D'Angelo's Pizza. It was a family business, and they served amazing Sicilian pizza. Dad had a son in the Navy and a daughter in the police, so he offered discounts to military and emergency services. We quickly became regulars. Mike and Cindy loved this place. We had a great time. When we got home, we invited them to join us the next evening to watch a movie. We won't have that chance for quite some time. Alex and I were rarely off duty at the same time. My main contribution to our apartment was entertainment. I had an 85-inch LCD TV and a DVD collection approaching 5,000. Most of them were DVDs, but there were also Blu-rays. My DVD deck was a high-end setup hooked up to a Bose soundbar that could blow the walls off at maximum volume. It turned out that Mike and Cindy loved classic horror and science fiction films, which were my favorites. I had both in my collection. Alex wasn't a big fan of science fiction, but she loved horror, especially demonic things. Imagine. So movie night became a regular occurrence whenever Alex and I were together. We ordered a couple of pizzas from D'Angelo and had fun all evening. We all really enjoyed it. Alex said that I am the biggest and safest flirt in the world. Damn right. Do you really think I could cheat on a demon? Mike laughed and said that Cindy was a professional tease. Very little time passed, and the two of us began to fight like cats and dogs, while our spouses laughed until they dropped. I really liked Cindy. She wasn't as beautiful as Alex, but she was cute, with shoulder-length light brown hair and light green eyes. She was a little stockier, and I would guess she had a 34-something bust. She had an ass that could kill and a smile that made guys salivate, including me. I often teased her about her pink lipstick, which was too pale for those luscious lips. She snapped that red was too loud, and she liked pink. She said it suited my baby pink cheeks. True, she did not specify which cheeks. When I suggested she try blue or purple, Alex and Mike burst out laughing. I won that night. Cindy was a vicious tease, and I can't remember too many evenings that didn't end with her tricking me at least once. Alex laughed at me mercilessly for this. They wanted children, but they weren't very lucky. The fertility clinic they went to told them Mike had a very low sperm count. He wasn't sterile, and they could have a baby. They just had to keep trying. I was working the evening shift when I received a notification to call home immediately. I headed to the nearest station and called Alex. She told me to meet her at Bayview Emergency Room, Hamilton's large trauma center. Cindy went to the hospital. I called my boss and got permission to go to Bayview. Alex was waiting, and we headed to the emergency room. Mike was with Cindy, and they both looked devastated. They didn't even look at us when we said hi, so we started looking for a doctor or nurse. Luckily, we found the nurse on duty almost immediately. We were stunned when she told us that Cindy had just had a miscarriage. We didn't even know she was pregnant. From what the nurse told us, Cindy didn't know either. Not right away, but after a couple of months, Cindy eventually returned to her cheerful, geeky self. It made me feel really good. We were waiting for them at the cinema in the evening when they knocked and entered. Judging by the expressions on their faces, it didn't look like we were going to watch anything. Mike had a worried expression on his face, and Cindy looked scared. Mike told us that Cindy was being stalked. She began receiving suggestive and then threatening emails at work, followed by obscene, threatening phone calls. They changed her number, but the calls continued. They came to us because the pursuer apparently knew her address. We notified the police and placed the apartments under increased surveillance. It made them feel more comfortable, but the police couldn't be here all the time. Alex and I gave her the key to our apartment and told her to feel free to use it even if we weren't home. I was watching a movie one evening while Alex was working the night shift. It was 1 o'clock in the morning when a phone call startled me. It was Cindy. The stalker just called her again, and this time he told her he was coming for her. I told her to come down to us immediately. She said no. Mike's unit was alerted again, and she didn't know where he was. She called the fort's military police unit. They told her they would try to find his unit and send him an email, but they couldn't promise anything. She didn't want to leave her apartment in case Mike actually showed up. I said, okay, I'll be right there. I pulled on the soft sweatpants I always carried and grabbed the bulldog. About 3 minutes later, I was at Cindy's apartment. She was wearing a robe, and it was obvious that she had recently been in the shower. She let me in and hugged me tightly, thanking me for coming. This hug made me feel a little awkward since she obviously hadn't gotten dressed after her shower. She was watching TV, an old science fiction movie that was one of my favorites. I didn't hesitate when she asked me to sit down and watch it with her. Cindy didn't like guns, but she didn't say anything when I pulled the bulldog out of my pocket and stuck it between the pillow and the armrest of the sofa. I sat on the edge of the sofa, where I could reach the revolver in about 2 seconds. Cindy lay on her side with her head and shoulder on my chest, her left hand resting on my stomach. This position was second nature to me, almost instinctive, as Alex and I had watched countless similar films this way. I didn't realize how instinctive it was until I felt Cindy's hand stroking my right arm and saw me doing the same to hers. There didn't seem to be anything special about it, so I went back to watching the movie. A few minutes later, Cindy made a low meowing sound, her head buried on my shoulder, and her hand began to stroke my stomach. I looked down and saw that my hand had moved and was now stroking her breast from the side. I quickly pulled away. "Sorry, Cin," I said, blushing at my mistake. Her answer amazed me. "For what?" she giggled. "I don't mind." As soon as she said this, I tensed up, feeling as her hand passed below my belt. Her giggle turned into a giggle as her head slid from my shoulder to her stomach. I admit it. I've fantasized about Cindy many times, but I never imagined it would happen. I never wanted to cheat on Alex, but now that it was a reality, I couldn't stop. I felt her hands slide into my sweatpants and began to work her gentle magic. There was nothing I could do to stop her. She slipped out of her robe, then slid off the sofa. As I suspected, she was naked. I slipped out of my clothes and then sank to the floor next to her. "My turn," I grinned. "Are you sure you want this?" She didn't answer. She smiled at me, then pulled my head towards her, giving me a very passionate kiss. It surprised me because it tasted like strawberries, maybe a new lipstick. It didn't matter. My lips slid down to her chin, then down her neck. I bit her collarbone, but was very careful not to leave any marks. She jumped slightly, and I heard a quiet scream. The taste of her skin was enchanting. I slid further down, spending some time probing her navel, my tongue moving around it in gentle, circular motions. She pulled back slightly and looked at me. "Please, Jay, don't tease me anymore. Have sex with me. I can't stand it anymore." I bowed my head, kissing her tenderly. She didn't seem to mind the soft touch of our lips, so the kiss dragged on. I pulled away and put her down on the carpet again. "Okay, baby. Of course." We loved each other tenderly, and when she reached the finish line, it was soft, long, and sweet. Her low moan was one of the most erotic things I've ever heard. Just a few moments later, I followed her. It may not be measured on the Richter scale, but this was one of the most enjoyable peaks I have ever experienced. We lay together for a minute or two, not wanting to leave, but I knew that on the carpet it would not be so comfortable for her to lie on her back. Besides, a naughty thought popped into my head. I stood up, pulled my sweatpants back on, and picked up the bulldog. Cindy looked at me in confusion. "You're not leaving, are you?" "Just for a minute, Cin," I smiled. "There is something at home that I want to take. Put on your robe, I'll be back in a minute. Do you want me to get dressed?" "Just a robe," I grinned. "Don't worry, not for long." She looked at me as if I was crazy, but she shrugged and reached for her robe. She slid in as I closed the door. Cindy tormented me for months with a little teasing phrase that she only used when we were alone. In her most innocent, childish voice, she looked at me and said, "Gee, Mr. Deputy, are you going to handcuff me to the bed and have your way with my poor defenseless body?" I decided that now is the right time for this. Alex and I had a king-size bed with a bookshelf headboard. At the head of the bed, there were sliding doors on both sides, which made it possible to place some personal items inside and hide them from prying eyes. Alex and I kept our handcuffs, pistols, and stun guns at the head of the bed. When I reached the bedroom, I had just opened the door at the head of the bed when I heard a thud and a muffled scream from upstairs. The handcuffs remained where they were. I was out the door a few seconds later with the bulldog in my hand. When I got to Cindy's apartment, the door was slightly open. She stood with her back to the far wall of the kitchen, and a short man stood in front of her. He didn't look much bigger than her, but Cindy was terrified. I entered the apartment and said, "Hello?" He turned and looked at me. When he did, he moved slightly away from Cindy. He had a knife in his hand. It looked like some kind of hunting knife, but I didn't care. There was no "drop the knife, let the girl go, let's talk about it," or any of the other nonsense that you see on TV and in the movies. The guy had a weapon and his intended victim within reach. I fired. He jumped back, hitting the refrigerator, then fell to the floor, the knife flying to the side. If the gunshot didn't wake up everyone in the building, Cindy's scream did. She didn't faint. She just froze against the wall, looking down in horror. I put the gun back in my pocket and walked over to Cindy. Her robe was open and cut, but it didn't look like she was injured. I buttoned the robe and tied the belt, then carefully led her to the sofa and sat her down. Then I returned to the kitchen. I should probably mention that the kitchen and living room were only separated by a counter, so I wasn't going to let Cindy out of my sight, but I had a few things to do. I walked back to the counter and pulled the bulldog out of my pocket. I opened the cylinder and poured 5 cartridges into my palm. Bulldog lay down on the counter. The cylinder was open. I placed 4 live rounds side by side and placed 1 spent cartridge next to them. Then I went back to Cindy. She was clearly in shock. I didn't want to go back to the kitchen since it was now an active crime scene. Instead, I went to the bathroom to get her some cool water. I brought her a cup, holding a pair of damp washcloths in my hands. I made her take a few sips, but that was enough. I put the cup aside and began wiping my forehead, face, and throat with it. I was still doing this when the door opened. Lieutenant Davenport of Internal Affairs lived in the same building. There was no doubt that the shot had woken him. He came in with a weapon in his hand, but holstered it as soon as he saw me. "Are you okay, Carrie?" "Yes, sir." "The victim is in shock. The criminal is in the kitchen. He's killed. My weapons are on the counter, already disassembled." The lieutenant entered the kitchen. His face changed into a dark grimace. "Lord, what a mess! Did you have to use that damn howitzer?" "First think about how it was, sir. When I heard the noise, I simply reached over to the head of the bed and grabbed the first thing I had to hand, and he immediately came up here." "Yes, okay," he agreed. "Is she all right?" "I think so." "Fine. Shut up for a minute. I have to report this." I nodded, knowing what he had to do. All detectives had walkie-talkies. He took another look, then turned on the microphone. "Radio 301. I could hear the dispatcher respond. 301, continue. "Have you received a call from Moonraker Apartments yet?" "Yes, sir, repeatedly. Reports of shots fired." "Fine. I am the acting commander here. We have an officer involved in a shooting. Criminal, signal 48, dead. The victim is in shock. I need a personal detective to examine the crime scene. Notify me, PR, and the chief. Send signal 4 and inform the police that we are on the scene. Code 4, so slow down, everyone." "Sure. Code 4, 03 PR5. Radio 7103 on duty. I confirm. Is she free? I confirm. Send her. Clear. Dispatcher 7103. "Oh God, Lieutenant," I objected. "Don't send her. Cindy is her best friend." "Sandy has been through this before, Carrie. She will come to support the victim, not as an investigator." At this point, we began to hear sirens, but some of them suddenly went silent. Others continued to arrive. I assumed that the police had not yet received the Code 4 message. Just as I was thinking about this, those sirens went silent. Lieutenant Davenport returned to the counter. He pulled out a couple of small bags for ammunition and weapons from his pocket. "I'll confiscate your weapons for a couple of days." "Yes, sir. Do you need my service weapon?" "No, keep it with you." He came over to me and knelt down in front of Cindy. She looked past him with an unseeing gaze. "Ma'am," he asked, "did he sexually harass you?" Oh Christ, I wondered if they would make a brushstroke on violence. It was in my sperm and my DNA. How was I going to explain this? I heard her say in a quiet voice, "No, sir, he didn't have time to do that. I'm fine." I started breathing again. Only then did I notice that the TV was still on. Events accelerated. The police were the first to arrive at the scene, then the ambulance crew. Next up is a crime scene detective. Then Alex came in. She nodded to Lieutenant Davenport, then went to look around the kitchen. Davenport looked at her and she simply shook her head. No one seemed to know who this asshole was. Alex came up to me. "Are you okay, Jay?" "Yes." By this time, I was beginning to doubt whether this was really the case. "He is dead?" She looked at me strangely. Her eyes narrowed and her brow furrowed. "Are you sure you're okay?" I didn't answer. She called the lieutenant and talked to him for a minute, then relieved me and sat next to Cindy. The lieutenant called me. "Carrie, come here." I went. "Sir, go put on some street clothes. I'll take you to the station. You can fill out your report and give it to me, and then I will place you on administrative leave. Let's." Detectives identified the culprit the next day. He had convictions for breaking and entering, home invasion, and aggravated assault. He was about to move on to something much worse when I stopped him. I ended up going to a mandatory consultation. I'd never killed a person before, and I didn't really like it. Even with Alex's constant support, it took 2 months before they allowed me to work normally again. I'm still going. Around the same time, Mike was transferred to Fort Benning, Georgia. I don't know what he's supposed to do there. The night before they left, we all went out to dinner. Yes, D'Angelo, we are friends. Alex and Cindy talk often by phone or email. Alex and I are still happily married. I don't know if she ever found out what happened that night or if she even cared. I was hardly the only love interest in her life, but I can't be sure of this. I don't think she ever cheated on me. I hope she never does this. Oh, yes. That envelope. The cover of the card featured a pair of cute blue balloons tied with ribbons. In big, bold, blue letters, it said, "It's a boy." I grinned from ear to ear as I opened the card. Inside was a message written in Cindy's clear, unmistakable handwriting. "Thank you, Daddy. Love, Mikey." A lipstick kiss was applied over the top, hot pink lipstick. I grinned again. Then I burned the card. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.